Welcome to Fireside Chats with Pastor Jed
and Pastor Kinah.
We're so glad you could join us tonight. We are really excited to be in episode 25.
Yes.
It's entirely possible that we may be wrapping up this particular series this week and next week.
Yes.
We are, tonight, we're going to be in Revelation chapter 21. And we're going to discuss tonight, what does the bride look like? And before we get started, I will just go ahead and kind of refresh everyone to the dark and twisty things that chapter 20 finished out.
Oh, God.
We had the great white throne judgment. We had all of the sea and death and hell giving up its dead to come before and be judged. And those that were not written in the Lamb's Book of Life, they were cast into the lake of fire. And then sort of at the end of that chapter, basically he just kind of says, whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. Even though during that he does do a little bit more description of that. So kind of dark, kind of twisty.
Yeah.
A little disturbing. And
but on a brighter note.
Yes.
On a more positive note. We start off in chapter 21 with this amazing verse, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. Now, the first thing that comes to my mind in that is that maybe it could be that those that are such fervent espousers of climate change may be onto something.
Right.
You know?
Because the Lord's like, done with it.
Yes. And it may be, in fact, it appears as though the first heaven and the first earth, they're going to just, go up in a puff of fire or smoke or something. But here's my point about all of this is that whatever happens, God is in charge.
Absolutely.
He is in control.
Right. He's the one.
He has not put it into man's ability to destroy creation or to even damage it beyond the limits that God has allowed him to.
I totally believe that.
Oh, I do too.
I don't think you can think that God is all powerful and then be like, and we are destroying his will. Yeah. It's like, actually, we can be out of his will, but that just means that we're not getting to play the game with the one who's going to win it. Yeah. His will is going to be done. Now, I'll tell you what I thought of when you read that verse
tell me.
Sunshine every day makes a desert. Because it says there was no more sea.
There's no more sea. Yeah, think about that too. I believe, if I remember from my earlier school days, that the oceans cover 5/6 of the earth.
That's a significant amount.
That means that 1/6 of it is left for the land masses.
Right.
And so if there's no more land mass,
or no more sea.
And it's all land mass, you have a whole lot more room.
You do.
Now, there's always the possibility that the new earth may be smaller. may be smaller.
Right, because
we don't know.
It
doesn't say. So,
but this is really cool. And he does go on and say, and I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband.
Yes.
So that's interesting because he's seeing a city, but he doesn't describe, at this point, he doesn't say, I see a city of people. He doesn't say, I see a city of buildings. He just says, I see a city.
Yeah.
We have no idea really what that means.
Exactly.
And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God. Doesn't this look, Dad, like God's, what you see is his plan from Exodus?
Yes.
When he brings the people out of Egypt and he's like, so you're going to be my people, I'm going to dwell in the midst of you. And then they mess it up because they're terrified.
Yeah.
And they can't obey for 5 seconds. They're
Right.
astonishingly human.
Yeah.
And yet you see that reflected here. And God is saying, hey, my tabernacle is going to be there. I'm going to dwell in the midst of you.
Yes.
And
Which is what he tried to
do.
do.
Right.
He tried to do in the wilderness.
Yes.
You know, he even gave them a plan for the tabernacle so that he could dwell in the midst of them without being contaminated by their sinfulness.
Right. Yeah.
And now it appears as though,
It's coming to fruition.
yes, and this time he's not going to have to set the same boundaries because his bride is not going to be
Right.
contaminated by sin.
Right. He's got
Yes.
a pure bride.
Yes.
And there doesn't have to be those boundaries.
He's not even, notice this, he doesn't let his bride put her feet down on a dirty, nasty, filthy, sin full earth.
Wow, yeah.
It is a new
It's a
heaven
brand
and a
new
new earth.
That's never been
Yes.
has never been tainted
Right.
by sin.
Yeah.
Which Mom and I always like to refer back to. I think it's Colossians where it talks about how Jesus was the firstborn of every creature.
Every creature.
And it talks about how he redeemed all of creation.
Yes.
And so you see that in not only is the bride redeemed and whole and new, but also heaven and earth is new. And
Yeah.
everything is
Yeah.
untainted by
Yes.
sin.
Oh, it's awesome.
But will it last?
Well, that's...
And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. So
Wow.
that kind of sounds like there's no, almost like there's no memory associated with emotion
Yeah.
from previous.
Could be. Could
I don't
be.
know.
Could be. And there's no pain.
Right?
There's no sickness.
Right?
There's no sorrow. Wow.
Yeah.
It's a whole new world.
A
And,
whole new world.
And it's not because we resisted the urge to drive an SUV.
No, it's because
Yeah.
God decided this is the way I want things. But let's see what else he's
Sure.
doing. And he that sat upon the throne said, behold, I make all things new. I love that.
Wow. Yeah.
And he said unto me, write, for these words are true and faithful. And he said unto me, it is done. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. That's interesting.
Yes. Wow. And apparently your time is up.
I know, right?
Let me do something about
Right.
this.
Somebody's really trying to get a hold of you. And I would like to say for the record, it's not me. So here he's declaring to John who he is. He is the Alpha and the Omega. He is the beginning and the end. He's saying, I am everything.
Yes.
I make all things new. I am everything. Everything exists in me. And I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. But it feels like there's going to be a caveat to that.
Yes. And there is. He that overcometh shall inherit all things.
Mm-hmm.
And I will be his God, and he shall be my son. But, and this is the thing,
Yeah.
even here in this end time expose of the glories of heaven, where the new Jerusalem has come down upon the new earth in the midst of the new heaven, and all things are new, old things are passed away, it's still this thing of, but you've got to overcome.
Right, you've got to overcome.
Now, I'll give you the power to,
Right.
and you
But
won't have to do it by
choose,
yourself,
right?
but you've got to choose that.
Right.
Because if you'll choose to be an overcomer, you will succeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you don't, here's what he says. He says, but the fearful and the unbelieving and the abominable and murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars. You know, I was doing pretty good there in this list till he got to that one.
Liars, lies, and liars that tell lies.
Oh my goodness, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death.
So now here's a question.
Yes.
Now, here he is, he's talking about this, like God is speaking to him. John's having this vision of this thing happening, and then he sees, all it says is, and he that sat upon the throne said. Well, if you look at the previous chapter, it was the great white throne judgment. So
Yeah.
you have to infer that since this is 6 or 8 verses later, that he's talking about, Jesus Christ sitting on the throne, judging, from the great white throne.
Yeah.
But you get this sort of mental picture where he's been in the throne room the whole time.
Yeah.
He saw all this happen, and then he sees the new heaven and the new earth. He sees Jerusalem the new Jerusalem coming down. And then he hears that voice saying, so this is for those that are thirsty, that want me to be their God. But these are the people that are not. And Dad, some of the stuff that are in the fearful.
Yeah. The fearful.
Do you know how many people in this last year just jumped into that category and haven't been able to claw their way out?
Right. Right.
Or,
yeah.
And the unbelieving. The unbelieving. God,
Yeah.
we are all there at some time or another.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really interesting that he covers this whole sort of sliding scale.
Yeah.
If you are not conducting yourself in such a way that you are oriented towards me, then you're not going to make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very interesting.
Yes.
So then he goes on to say in verse 9, and there came unto me one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials of the 7. I don't know where I got 12 from. I literally just made
Because
up.
every other number in this whole chapter is 12 except for that
Right,
one.
except for that one. So I
And
just
it's
threw it
7,
in there.
yes.
All right, I'm going to start over.
Okay, start over.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
Don't start all the way back at the first. Just start right at the number
Verse
7.
9.
Yes.
Okay, verse 9. And there came unto me one of the 7 angels which had the 7. I wish you would read this. I'm
I'm going to have to because, it just dawned on me that it already said 7 12 times. And you had a hard time with it.
I did.
So, all right, and there came unto me one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials full of the 7 last plagues. And now he doesn't have those anymore. They poured them out.
They poured them out.
And said unto and talked with me, saying, Come hither, I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife. Now this is interesting. I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God.
Wow.
Now, that's apparently what the bride looks like.
Right.
Now, isn't that interesting that people don't understand today? There is fighting in the streets of Jerusalem today. There is fighting over the Temple Mount today. Mm-hmm. There are, just a few days ago, there were bombs being shot out of Gaza into the cities of Israel, some of which were aimed at Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. And it is so hard for people to understand how much God loves Jerusalem.
Right, the city of David.
And he goes all the way back to when David made a bad mistake.
Yeah.
He made a poor choice,
Right.
like every one of us have, and to reconcile that poor choice and the judgment of God that came upon him because of it,
Right.
he had to do something very, very special and very intricately tied into God's plan. He had to buy the threshing floor of a man whose name I have a hard time pronouncing.
Right.
Aronak.
His name began with an A.
Yes. And,
Yeah.
and then he bought that threshing floor, even though that man, the owner, was willing to give it to him. He said, no, I cannot offer God anything that did not cost me anything.
Right, and that's such a beautiful
Oh,
statement.
So awesome. And it's there that he built an altar and he offered a sacrifice to God, and the plague was held back. And for those of us that have just spent the last 15 months or so in the midst of a plague, we understand how fearful that can be and how tragic that can be. And we've had 500,000 people in the United States to die, and I don't know how many millions around the world have died from this COVID disaster. And if I honestly believe that if somebody could have had the humility and the faith to believe God the way that David did,
Oh, right.
God, I will do whatever I have to do.
Humble yourself.
And God would
and
say,
pray.
okay, this is what you can do.
Yeah.
You know, but
Absolutely.
but no one was ready to do that, because first of all, the world is full of God deniers.
Right. Well,
And-
you know what? During this whole time, so many people have quoted. First Chronicles 7:14. If my people, which are called by my name,
Will humble themselves and pray
and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and heal their land. Well, what's interesting about that is he doesn't say he'll heal anybody else's.
Well, that's true.
If you
Yeah.
do what you're supposed to do, then
Yeah.
he will move in your life.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means for your family. I don't know what
Yeah.
that means for your community or for your country. Certainly, they would have some benefit in proximity,
Yeah.
but it may not mean anything for. And so I thought that was very interesting over the last year and a half.
Yeah.
So many people brought that up, and I thought, well, that is what I'm doing, and the Lord is blessing and keeping me.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to be doing a whole lot for, the country if you look at the mega picture.
Yes.
But anyway,
Yes.
so this holy city Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, and her light was like unto a stone most precious, even like a jasper stone, clear as crystal, and had a wall great and high, and had 12 gates. See, I nailed that.
You did.
Yeah. And at the gates 12 angels, and names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. So you're kind of seeing like a city four square, although it hasn't said that yet.
No, but it will.
And you're seeing, this great wall that's around it, with 3 gates on each side, with a total of 12, an angel at each of those gates.
Yeah.
And it says on the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and in them the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. Now that's interesting.
Yeah.
Especially since one of those jokers got in just by them rolling some dice.
I always
Please
thought
see
that they.
Acts chapter 1.
Yes, I always thought they just drew straws.
I'm pretty sure they
yes,
did.
Yes.
But it's not really that much different. Okay, and he that talked with me, which would be the angel that had this, one of the 7 angels with the 7 vials full of the 7 deadly plagues, right? That's what he's
Yes,
talking
and
to.
now he has traded it for
A
reed.
golden reed.
Yes.
So he that talked with me had a golden reed to measure the city and the gates thereof and the wall thereof.
Yes.
And here comes the measurements. And this is
Yes.
this is very gratifying for you, sir, who are a builder and a fan of symmetry.
Of symmetry, yes.
The
Yes.
city lieth 4 square.
Oh, thank God.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the length is as large as the breadth. And he measured the city with a reed, 12,000 furlongs.
Wow. 1,500 miles.
That's a pretty big city.
1,500 miles.
So, Dad, it's not even 1,500 miles from here to New Orleans.
Right. It's only about 700.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a big city.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So it's 1,500 miles or 12,000 furlongs. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal. So it's 1,500 miles high.
Yeah. And that throws a whole new kink in the equation there, because you don't really know. Your husband and I were talking recently about the technology that's becoming available and how that very soon we could be just flying from our house to the grocery store.
Right.
And these kind of things. And you think, well, but you know, it's
How's that
kind of
gonna
crazy
work?
when you start thinking about that. And New York City is an example where probably has more tall buildings
Oh yeah, that's where we keep all
in
of our
a single
tall
bound
buildings.
than,
Yeah.
you know. And yeah, that's where we keep them. And the interesting thing about the city of New York, and this may be this way in all of the major cities, is that you don't always own the airspace above you. And so you can only
buy that also?
well, you only own so much of it, which limits how tall your building can be.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well, I've noticed now that the government sometimes decides that there are no-fly zones,
yes.
which kind of indicates that that air belongs to the government.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly
So a
right.
city that's 1,500 miles high,
Yeah,
that's crazy, Dad.
right.
If you assume that, is it 10 feet that is one floor, or is it 12?
About 10, yeah.
About 10.
Yeah. On
So-
a floor on a single building, yeah.
So in a mile, you would have 528 floors. in a
Could
mile.
have, yes, could
Right.
have, yes.
528 floors.
Yeah.
That's a lot of floors.
It's a lot
And
of floors.
multiply that times
Yeah.
1,500.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's crazy.
Well-
I'll say this, it's gonna throw the earth off her axis. All
Yeah,
right,
could be.
so
Could be.
4 square.
Hey, but the earth may be flat this time.
Wouldn't that be something? On the back of a giant turtle. Flying through space.
Yeah.
And he measured the wall thereof 144 cubits, according to the measure of a man, that is, of the angel. So now this 1,500 mile city
Yeah.
has got an itty bitty wall.
Apparently, it's only about 72 feet long.
But 72 feet is
I mean,
still,
yeah.
I mean, that's pretty tall. Nobody's
Yeah,
gonna
it is.
scale that.
Yeah.
And it would be tough. But now here's the thing, is if there are flying things still, and we don't know,
We don't know.
but you could fly over the wall.
Yeah. Yes,
Anyway.
good. But you got 12
And
gates.
it's weird, like when you look at where we're at here, and
Yeah.
this, you're like, well, why do you need a wall? You know,
Right.
all of the dead that were evil were, we don't know yet, do we?
We don't know yet.
We don't know what's
We don't know
happening.
yet.
All right, so you got 144 cubit wall, and this is verse 18, and the building of the wall of it was of jasper, and the city was pure gold like unto clear glass. So the whole city was gold.
It seems that
like
way,
clear
yeah.
glass. So that would be beautiful. Like, it would look like a giant 1,500 mile square chandelier.
Or a high-rise in Dallas.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And the foundations of the wall were garnished with all manner of precious stones. The first foundation, jasper. The second, sapphire. The third, a chalcedony.
Chalcedony, yes.
The fourth, an emerald. The fifth, sardonyx. The sixth, sardius. The seventh, chrysolite. The eighth, beryl. The ninth, a topaz. The 10th, a chrysoprasus.
Chrysoprasus, yeah, your guess is as good as mine on that one. Never
The
heard of it.
11th, a jacinth. And the 12th, an amethyst. Wow. So there's a different kind of precious stone in
Yes.
each of these
And-
foundations.
And that's nothing compared to what's next.
Okay, all right. And the 12 gates, 3 on each side, remember, were 12 pearls. Every several gate was of 1 pearl. Good grief.
Can you imagine the size of that oyster?
God, no. Listen, I'll tell you what's amazing.
Yeah,
There ain't no sea.
they ain't no sea.
Think about that.
Maybe they grow bigger when they're not in the water.
Maybe. That's crazy, though.
Well, it is.
Right. So you've got an entire pearl that is
Yeah.
the gate. And the street of the city was pure gold, as it were transparent glass.
And this thing about, that's twice that they've made reference to gold being as clear glass.
Right, being
Of
completely
transparent, just so, yeah, and what that tells me, I have seen a little bit of gold in my days. I
Yeah.
have a gold ring on my finger.
Right, that's very nice.
It's been there for some 43 years.
Good. You did good.
Yeah.
Last Sunday, you weren't sure how many years it had been.
Well, you know. Anyway, I
But
feel better
having
about
seen
that.
gold,
But having seen gold, I cannot imagine gold being as clear glass,
right,
as transparent glass. And we talk in terms of gold and its purity as being in carats, 24 karat gold,
yeah,
and so forth and so on. But apparently, and I think, if I remember right, 24 karat gold is about as pure as man can make it.
right,
But obviously, God can do better than that.
right.
Yeah.
He can do better.
Yeah.
And think about this, if your surfaces are clear like transparent glass, okay? Well, first of all, what an incredible substance. And you wonder if maybe it's not soft. Gold is soft.
Yes,
You can-
and the
you
more
can bite
pure
it.
it is, the softer it is.
Right, so that's weird to think
Yeah.
about. But then you've got the foundations with all of these different layers of precious stones
Yeah.
that God apparently feels is beautiful.
Uh-huh.
That's you can see them through the surface of the road,
Wow.
and you see the city stretching up, and the
Wow.
light is shimmering off of it.
Uh-huh.
The reflections off of a crystal are amazing. So the reflections off of a city of pure gold has got to be just blinding.
Yes, yes.
That's got to be amazing.
Exactly.
All right, so verse 22. And I saw no temple therein, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple of it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon, to shine in it. For the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof.
Yes.
Now that's an interesting way that they put that this city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon.
Yeah.
It doesn't say the earth.
Just says the city. So
Interesting.
what does that mean?
Well, it means that by that time, Elon Musk will have come up with those powered walls.
Yeah.
And as long as, the Lord is present, then everything will be lit up everywhere. No, it's very obvious that the very presence of the Lord
Yeah.
is going to lighten the city.
Yeah.
And the nations of them which are saved.
The nations of them which are saved.
So you already see there that there's a differentiation. There's this evidence that there are still nations.
Yeah.
And that they're discernible. Like there's, right?
Seems to be. Seems to be. And apparently, nations have a spiritual condition.
I thought you had handled that situation.
I thought I did too, but I'm sorry. I will just have to do something about this. There we go. Now, be still.
Be still. So the nations of them which are saved shall walk in the light of it. But now it gets weirder, Dad.
Yeah.
And the kings of the earth do bring their glory and honor into it.
Oh, Lord.
So you're
have
seeing
mercy.
like, so this is the afterlife. This is
1,000 years
right
after Armageddon. Yes.
You're seeing a new heaven, you're seeing a new earth, you've seen the bride, which is the New Jerusalem. She's a 1,500 mile square city. God himself is the light thereof. He and the Lamb are the temple therein. And then you've got nations of saved people that can walk in the light of the city. You've got kings of the earth that do bring their glory and honor unto it.
Yes.
So there are nations and there are kings.
Yes.
And then it says, and the gates of it shall not be shut at all by day, for there shall be no night there. So it's got gates, but they ain't shut. And so if you only have your gates open in the daytime, but there is no night there, then are they ever shut?
Apparently they're not using those pearls much.
No, they're beautiful. They're for looks, really.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
And they shall bring the glory and honor of the nations unto it.
Into it.
Into it. So those that are the nations of them that are saved can walk in the light of it, which sort of indicates that they can come in. And the kings of the earth do bring their glory and honor into it. But then in verse 27 it says, and there shall in no wise enter into it anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh abomination or maketh a lie, but they which are written in the Lamb's book of life.
Yes.
But the thing about that is it infers that there are people still in existence. Now we know the dead they've resurrected, they've been judged, and they've been cast into the lake of fire.
Yes.
But there are still people that exist on this earth that are not part of the Lamb. They're not the Lamb's bride. They're not part of the city. They're not part of... Isn't that interesting?
And they can't come in.
And they can't come in. Well, look, I think we're going to have to leave that there tonight. And I hate to leave you on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
But join us next week for episode 26 when we get into chapter 22 of Revelation and uncover a little bit more of what this city looks like and what this new earth kind of holds for us.
Absolutely.
Have a great night. Thank you for joining us.